My name is Dan Willis. I was in the United States Navy. I held a top secret crypto level 14 extra sensitive material handling security clearance. I worked in the code room at the Naval Communications Station in San Francisco. In 1969, I received a priority message from a ship near Alaska that was classified as secret. The ship reported emerging out of the ocean near port bow, a brightly glowing reddish-orange elliptical object, approximately 70 feet in diameter, emerged out of the water, shot into space, traveling at about 7,000 miles per hour. This was tracked on ship's radar and substantiated. Years later, I worked at the Naval Electronic Engineering Center in San Diego for 13 years. The co-worker who I worked with worked at the NORAD facility. When he first started working at the facility, he noticed objects going on the screens that track everything out in space and in the air, objects going off the scale, doing right-angle turns. When he inquired, his older supervisor advised him that, quote, it was just a visit from one of our little friends. I thought this a little unusual. These statements are true. I'm willing to testify under oath before Congress. Thank you.
A higher advanced civilization cannot interfere with a still evolving civilization. You don't want to interfere with their evolution. But what happened was when the Draco entered into an alliance with the Nazi SS, it violated the Prime Directive because the Draco was not supposed to give that advanced technology to the Nazis, which set a domino effect of things that happened. And so it allowed the Galactic Federation from the 1940s to present day to work behind the scenes. And there was it goes into a long, complicated story, what was happening, going back to 1942, the Battle of LA, 2 craft were shot down. There's documents behind all this. And the Navy got one, and the U.S. Army...
Whose craft was that? Whose craft was that in 1942?
That was the 2 ET drone craft got shot down. And so the Navy took one to China Lake, the other one went to Wright-Patterson. The Project RAN was overseeing all this. But what happened is General Henry Arnold brought in huge amount of money and felt like the Air Force should dominate on this because it has to do with things in the air, right? Not the Navy is just out. And so it kind of forced the Navy to do its own programs in secret. The Galactic Federation worked with, the Nordic looking beings, as William Tompkins testified about, these good-looking Nordic secretaries that were giving him information and things. And so they developed, it launched back in the 1980s, the U.S. Navy Solar War and Space Program, which, the 2001 event inspired a UK hacker, Gary McKidden, you're aware of, who hacked into the computers, and he saw the U.S. Navy Solar Warning Program. The Bush administration wanted to put him away for 70 years for revealing that to the public. But that launched back in the 1980s, and they've been using that advanced technology. It's hard for a lot of people to wrap their mind around that they can take somebody. They have technology that is like science fiction. They can take somebody and recruit them for 20 years, voluntarily. 20 years service duty in space. At the end of the duty, they age reverse them back to their age, like 17 years old or whatever, and time reverse them back to that point of enlistment, like within 10, 15 minutes, and wipe their memory.
Beyond the forbidden.
My first wake up was 1969, high-level top secret security clearance and communications, busiest military communication facility on the planet at that time. And regarding secret reports of some of the Navy ships reporting extraterrestrial crafts coming out of the ocean, going in to the Chief of Naval Operations, and that made it aware that obviously our government is aware of their presence here, and they're not letting the public know about it. And so that started my questioning, starting in 1969.
Well, Dan Willis, thank you very much for coming on Beyond the Forbidden. I really appreciate it, man.
And my pleasure.
So, like I said, I've been wanting to get you on for a while, and I came across you probably, man, I remember watching the Disclosure Project from May of 2001, but I didn't watch it then. Like I told you right before, I didn't really wake up to everything until 2006, and I probably watched it the early days of YouTube, probably 07 or 08, something like that. And I vaguely remember your name, but it didn't really dawn on to me after, I don't know, other things that happened, watching things, maybe clips of the Disclosure Project. I think it was like early teens, maybe 12 or 13 when I came across you. But so I guess, so I know a little bit about you, Dan. And everybody can go to the webmatrix.net. Is that correct, Dan?
Yeah, it was a article. A media company wanted me to write out of Hollywood, being an ex-ABC newsman, and so I wanted to find out what the hell happened, in 2001. How do you get 22 cameras in the mainstream media and all this information being disclosed, and just watching the media doing lockstep, this limited hangout of the information, keeping it from the public's awareness. That I wanted to find out what brought this about. I was like, why would all the media channels keep that obviously a coordinated effort? Until you research back through history, you don't understand how we've got to where we are today.
We're very amnesic when it comes to the past, and that's one thing that I keep saying is that we have to, well, everybody keeps saying we have to remember the past so we don't keep screwing up in the future. You know what I mean? We got to study and analyze the past. And one thing I don't like, Dan, is that we always talk, I've been mentioning this past couple podcast, that you hear a bunch of, and I'm guilty of it too, the younger generation, but a lot of older people say it too, the younger generation, man, this world screwed up, these younger kids now. And yes, I agree. But we, like my daughter in there, I'm going to try to take responsibility and raise her right, about reality and everything. She's going to learn how to do cursive. She's going to learn that, because they're not teaching that in schools. So what I'm trying to say is that, that we got to quit blaming, like take ownership of our own actions, because with each current generation, they're a byproduct of the previous generation's flaws.
That's true.
And I think I coined that term phrase. I don't know. So I'm surely out of 8 billion people, somebody said that or something similar to that before. But each current generation, or with whatever you think about each current generation, like the ones now, the younger generation, they are a byproduct of us, the flaws of us, of the previous generations.
That's so true. That how they were able to do it is generational indoctrination. In 1946, they rewrote the history of World War II to hide the Nazi escape and infiltration. And every generation, when you're a child, your parents are watching television, and your parents don't have any reason to question if the information is deceptive or not from that, news anchor that's speaking to you on the television set. And so you naturally just take that into your adult head. The media is an information source that's informing me of something. And there's all these journalists that would check on this information, and they would reveal something if it was not right. But it turns out that it's all centrally controlled, and anybody that speaks out is immediately fired. I think that's the problem today, is that it's too hard for a certain portion of the population to wrap their head around that our media has been, for several decades, been infiltrated and centrally controlled for an agenda that's against the people. But it's too hard for them to imagine that all these different media outlets, and they have a lot of them under their control, are deceiving the population.
I agree. And what did your family think of you whenever you started coming out with a lot of these things, especially like, I guess, around 2001 with the Disclosure Project? When you started really coming forward, I know you've been talking about it. I think I saw that video that you sent. I think you sent me, or I saw it somewhere else, from 1984. You've been doing these things for a long time. What did your family think? Because my family, my parents, my wife knows, but her parents, my parents, I live here in the South. There's still a lot of old ways here. They don't know all this stuff. If they ask me, like, I drop breadcrumbs. I talk about things like everything, conspiracies, the secret space program, the occult, the paranormal, ancient mystery. I do, but I'm not going to have a conversation like I do with you. I'm not going to, you know what I mean? Because they're not ready for it. I try to see if they're ready for it. I drop breadcrumbs, but they think I'm crazy with those little breadcrumbs. You know what I mean? So how did your family,
you have to take into account how they've been indoctrinated, how the information sources that they watch, CNN or read New York Times, or, what information sources formed their perceptions, so that you sound like a crazy conspiracy theorist, to them, based on their information sources. Well, what's, I'm like 74 now, so my parents had passed on a long time ago. My my brother's family and stuff, evangelical Christians, and it's like, I'm talking to demons on planet Mars or something, who knows? It's like there's so much heavy indoctrination. There's still love there in the family, but it's like a difference of view of what's reality in this world.
I totally agree. So I guess we're going to be talking about many things. I'm well familiar with your research, and I'm going to give links to everything in the description for everybody to check out. Some of your older things, some of the links that you sent me, and that little video that you did last year with you breaking down the Disclosure Project. It was like an hour long. Man.
Oh yeah.
That was
for, in San Jose. There was a secret space program conference, and I put that together for that.
You did a hell of a job with that, man.
That was my first time I ever, used a video editing software, like that.
You did good. You did good.
Oh, thanks. It's a continuity of a story that, my military experience, triggered my curiosity. And so over the years, I met with Bob Lazar when he first time meeting, and then no recordings were allowed, and I was sitting in the front row, and I had my camcorder going for 2 hours, and just wanted to document it to see if he's consistent. He's consistent over the decades. His testimony hasn't changed at all. And it turns out that the base freaked out, and they issued an NRO security advisory to all base personnel, and on that list they had these unacknowledged special access programs, of reverse engineering the extraterrestrial craft, which Dr. Greer got a hold of and met with the head of intelligence, the Joint Chiefs of Staff, at the Pentagon.
Do you want to help support Beyond Forbidden and receive extra content that's not seen anywhere else? By becoming a patron, a few things you will receive are the full-length 90-minute or 120-minute podcast episode. Members will also receive a private link of the video podcast and will only be exclusive to Patreon members. In-person, face-to-face interviews with some of the most well-known, respected researchers. Behind-the-scenes footage of interviews not seen anywhere else. And that's just a few perks. So what do you have to lose? Cut out one brain-rotting, overly processed Happy Meal a month that doesn't do anything beneficial for your mind, body, and spirit, and become a Patreon for just $5.
That showed these USAPs that were like cosmic ops, magi ops, and like that, that were reverse engineering extraterrestrial. And here the head of intelligence for the Joint Chiefs of Staff was not only denied access, like the CIA director was back in '93, James Woolsey, but he was threatened, to drop it immediately or he'd lose rank. And he told Dr. Greer, if you can get your people willing to talk before the media, you have my permission. This group is illegal. And he knew that ever since he met with the CIA director back in '93, he met with some military advisors and told them to start collecting witnesses. Because ever since Eisenhower lost control back in 1955, every president, CIA director, maybe not George H.W. Bush, but every president, CIA director, heads of intelligence, doesn't matter who you are, you're denied access into these programs. So, Dr. Greer had his life threatened not to bring forth. They had 500 witnesses, 21, which I was one, willing to testify under oath. We stated that after we gave our testimony, before a congressional hearing. My testimony, I thought, was minor compared to the other people revealing, bases on the other side of the moon. We had faster than light.
Who was that?
Craft.
Wolf?
Yeah.
Dr.
Carl Wolf.
Carl Wolf, yeah.
Yeah.
I'm going to show in the intro that little clip that you sent me, because that was a good little piece of yours. It was just maybe a minute or so of yours in the intro. Very good. And I need to rewatch the disclosure. It's been years. I actually forgot about Dr. Carl Wolf. I really did until you sent that to me. I totally forgot about it. And when I heard the name, I was like, oh yeah, I forgot he was a part of that. I need to rewatch the Disclosure Project. But when it comes to Stephen Greer, Dan, the only thing, he's done a lot of great work. He has. The only thing I don't agree with, man, is that I think the universe is vast. You know what I mean? Like, you know where I'm going. And it's not just him. There's a lot of other ones out there too that they're all good ETs. I can't see that.
For decades I've been studying classified documents that have been authenticated, witness testimonies, secret space program witnesses, of which I'm very close friends with a number of them, who have experienced interactions with the Draco, the reptilian beings that and the Greys. Many people have had abduction experiences that weren't the most pleasant. And yeah, for Dr. Greer, he says, there's no, they're all benevolent. There's no, just a big love fest out there in space. There's no, there's no evil or
it's like a current state of 1960s. So
yeah. The thing is that there's just too much evidence. He says that people who've had an experience like that, he says, well, they've been a screen memory, a false memory. But I know too many witnesses, and it just doesn't make any sense, because the universe is big out there, and there's a whole kind of spectrum of different agendas and everything. Fortunately, the regressive, the Nebu Greys, they're called, from Orion, that started, an agreement was cut with them with MJ-12 back in 1954. to allow them to abduct citizens for their hybrid program. We gave them underground facilities. The reptilians have been here for a long time. They've both been kicked out of the solar system back in 2021. The Arlington Institute, John Peterson, the Navy think tank, he confirmed that information from 3 independent sources that that's true. And so we don't really have any alien threat, and that's the other narrative. One is all the ETs are good, and that's not true. And the other narrative is, oh, the ETs are a threat. Now you have these Senate hearings on UFOs, UAPs. My friend Mark McCandish, who revealed, we had faster than light craft called alien reproduction vehicles,
ARVs, yeah,
in the 50s. He was going to testify at the 2021 hearing, but he was committed suicide just before he did that. And the other gentleman, who was Air Force intelligence specialist, Mike Tuber, who also revealed that the U.S. has this advanced technology, that the Tic Tac that was heavily promoted all over the place, from December of 2017, is also, made by Lockheed. And so he came out 1 week before Mark supposedly committed suicide and said, I made the whole story up. There's nothing to it. It's just a psychological test. Really suspicious, right? And then 1 week later, Mark, takes a gun to his head, supposedly. Now, what do both of these testimonies reveal? They reveal that we've had this technology that could pull off they had this plan for a long time, going back the report from Iron Mountain in '67, talking about contriving a threat from outer space. Von Braun's deathbed testimony about a false flag alien invasion was their last planned. Interestingly, we revealed that the next plan in a sequence of false flag plans was going to be a terrorist event. We did this in May of 2001, and you know what happened in September of 2001. So if everybody thinks that, oh, we don't have this kind of technology, like these Senate hearings, kind of, the Office of Naval Intelligence is there, and I found it interesting that Mr. Gallagher embarrassingly brings up the Admiral Wilson memo, which is a hot potato, which was basically when Admiral Wilson, after he met with Stephen Greer back in '97, he was mad as hell and wanted to find out what's going on in these operations that he's getting denied access. So we had a meeting with Dr. Eric Davis, the astrophysicist, and he apparently recorded the conversation in the Admiral's limo, and a copy of that was found in the archives of astronaut Dr. Edgar Mitchell after he passed away, and it got leaked on the internet. And it talked about, reverse engineering technologies not of this earth, and it talked about how the Admiral was basically threatened, that to drop it immediately or lose rank and see an early retirement. And so there is this interesting thing that the Office of Naval Intelligence kind of, we don't know anything about that. It's not.
I found that comical. It's like, really? Come on now.
And then they bring up the Maelstrom Air Force Base incident, where a red glowing UFO shuts down 10 nuclear-tipped ICBM missiles. Captain Robert Salas was in control of that in a command module about 60 feet underground. And, he said it just, rapidly, just shut them all down. And they didn't they didn't have anything about that either, so.
It should have been brought up. I didn't mean to interrupt you, Dan, but what should have been brought up, especially because all of this kind of started with the Tic Tacs, I guess, since 2017. All
Anything that comes out of the New
progressively.
York Times, it got green lighted by the deep state.
And so, what should have been also asked with the Tic Tacs, if you remember Lonnie Zamora, is it Lonnie Zamora, the sheriff or the police officer in New Mexico, whenever he saw the Tic Tac shaped with beans come out, and
is that the Zaccaro incident? Yeah, it
I
was
forgot
shaped
the it's
like a
like
pill.
like a
Yeah,
pill, an egg, but it's kind of like a Tic Tac. You know what I mean? Like, and that was back in the '60s,
yeah,
I
that was a
think.
long time
And I
ago.
think the officer was Lonnie or Ronnie Zamora, something like that. But there's so much evidence out there, or first witness testimonies. There's so
Oh,
much,
yeah, there's a lot
so
of
much.
evidence on that case.
And back to the Disclosure Project, because I know September 11th, it put a damper to that, kind of killed it. I know that.
A little bit of a distraction, yeah.
But how come nothing came out of that? That was more groundbreaking than what's going on now, you know.
Well, it's interesting. Here I'm looking at 22 cameras in the back row, myself being, like I said, an ex-ABC newsman. I was thinking, how could this not be a world-changing event? Talking about president, CIA directors being, we have 0 point energy, we don't need nuclear, oil, and coal, bases on the moon, astronauts are sworn to secrecy, what happened when they went to the moon, NASA's airbrushing out the UFOs, all these people, 57 different species already categorized, all this explosive evidence. And what the media did, they call it a limited hangout. It said, we are not alone. And that they want to have a congressional hearing on the reality of UFOs. They brought 500 witnesses. And then CBS wanted to do an interview with me after they saw me on CNN and with the rest of the witnesses. I said, I refuse unless you promise I can say we have the scientists which can prove before an open congressional hearing we have 0 point energy. Put it on the table, show it working. They promised. They flew down from Los Angeles, interviewed me for 45 minutes. Afterward, they did a cookie cutter of what CNN did and the rest of them. And the producer, she said, I never had this happen before. The higher executives made me cut that part out. And all I said was, we have a solution. We have the scientists willing to prove it. And so I became aware that obviously the intelligence communities, which are working hand in hand with the media outlets, are keeping this from our public. And so sometime after that, a media company out of Hollywood wanted me to write an article on the control of the media in regards to the UFO issue, and I gladly accepted, because in 2001, I didn't even know what Operation Mockingbird was. And so, I started to research back through the beginning of the 20th century to present day and started plugging in all these witness testimonies I was aware of and all these documents. And after a while, after you look at so much evidence over a long period of time of documents, over the decades, it starts to form a hidden picture that is a high probability of what's been hidden to the world. And the picture keeps its own best secrecy because it sounds like an extreme science fiction movie if you get into the real reality of it. And that's why it keeps its secrecy so well, because it's hard for people to imagine that the Nazi SS entered into an alliance with the Reptilians down in Antarctica that defeated Admiral Byrd in Operation High Jump, and they flew over the Capitol in 1952, and they basically forced Eisenhower into a surrender in 1955. What happened was Eisenhower met with the Galactic Federation of Worlds back in February 1954, and he was planning on going on radio and television and revealing this to the world. You know, according to one of the, Gerald White was one of the witnesses there, and he said it was his conviction that he believed that was going to happen. But what happened was, and that was supposed to happen in May of 54, but what happened in May of 54 instead was a Nazi SS, former Nazi SS, Prince Bernhard sets up the Bilderberg meetings, which they have these yearly secret meetings. And then MJ-12, because the Galactic Federation wasn't willing to give advanced technology until they assisted us with our spiritual development, you know, so we can handle this high level of technology. The Orion Greys, which they warned about, were willing to give some technology. And so behind Eisenhower's back, they cut a deal with the Orion Greys in order to sell out our civilization. And this was a plan to basically take over our planet through their hybrid program, which they had to actually do a change in the prime directive, because these sneaky little bastards, they were trying to work around. There is actually such a thing as a prime directive, which the Galactic Federation works with, which is wonderful news if you're not aware of all this, because it's actually a moral basis, which civilizations across the galaxy have all gathered together and have a basis, which is a moral basis.
Do the malevolent ETs follow the prime directive though?
No, they.
How does that work? Because usually bad factions, evil, malevolence, usually they don't go by the rules, and they usually get their way. So how does that work? You know, like how can the good guys actually help this war that's going on behind the scenes whenever the bad guys don't follow the rules?
Well, how that works is that the malevolent ETs, they're not allowed to join the Galactic Federation, because like our planet, for example, is in a probationary period. We went till we can reach a certain point, clean house, so to speak, you know, with the deep state and everything, to be able to join. Once you join the Galactic Federation, then you have access to, you know, advanced technology and medical technology and all this. But how that works is, what they've done is the Galactic Federation has worked with the Earth Alliance, which is basically our guys, the white hats that have a secret space program, working together with the Galactic Federation, remove them. And how the prime directive works is that a higher advanced civilization cannot interfere with a still evolving civilization. You want to interfere with their evolution. But what happened was, when the Draco entered into an alliance with the Nazi SS, it violated the prime directive, because the Draco was not supposed to give that advanced technology to the Nazis, which set a domino effect of things that happened. And so it allowed the Galactic Federation from the 1940s to present day to work behind the scenes. And there was it goes into a long, complicated story, what was happening, going back to 1942, the Battle of LA, 2 craft were shot down. There's documents behind all this. And the Navy got one, and the U.S. Army.
Whose craft was that? Whose craft was that in 1942?
That was the 2 ET drone craft got shot down. And so the Navy took one to China Lake, the other one went to Wright-Patterson. The Project RAN was overseeing all this. But what happened is General Henry Arnold brought in huge amount of money and felt like the Air Force should dominate on this, because it has to do with things in the air, right? Not the Navy is just out. And so it kind of forced the Navy to do its own programs in secret. This allowed the kind of unloading a lot of information here.
No, this show's about you and your knowledge and your intellect and everything, because I'm always here, Dan. So spill away, man.
Well, because the Navy was operating in secret, the Galactic Federation worked with the Nordic looking beings, as William Tompkins testified about, these good-looking Nordic secretaries that were giving him information and things. And so they developed, it launched back in the 1980s, the U.S. Navy Solar War and Space Program, which, the 2001 event inspired a UK hacker, Gary McKidden, you're aware of, who hacked into the computers, and he saw the U.S. Navy Solar Warning Program. The Bush administration wanted to put him away for 70 years for revealing that to the public. But that launched back in the 1980s, and they've been using that advanced technology. It's hard for a lot of people to wrap their mind around that they can take somebody. They have technology that is like science fiction. They can take somebody and recruit them for 20 years, voluntarily. 20 years service duty in space. At the end of duty, they age reverse them back to their age, like 17 years old or whatever, and time reverse them back to that point of enlistment, like within 10-15 minutes, and wipe their memory. And I'm friends with so many people that having memory recall, like my friend Tony Rodriguez. Unfortunately, he got kind of abducted into the dark elements of the Nachtwaffen, the Dark Fleet, which the Navy, not the Navy, the Nazi SS developed, and kind of a bad situation that he ended up in. But other friends, like my friend Jean Charles Morin, who he was in the French section of the Solar Warden program, and he was in operations where rescuing people that were trapped by the Draco on Mars. And he had a situation where he had to go up against this black Draco, and he saved his friend by pushing him away, but he didn't hit his protection belt in time fast enough, because they're telepathic. They know what you're going to think next. And so it's like
I don't know if I'd like that, Dan.
It's a formidable enemy. And so what happened was that his tail whipped around and almost broke his body totally in half. So they were able to get him back to a med bed that was able to restructure him completely. I mean, the holographic medical technology is incredible. And I worked in the 1980s, due to an ET experience I had in 1977, that this being that my friend Elena identified as an emethor, looks like a gray, but they're not a gray. They're benevolent race. Is giving me this information about the geometry of the matrix and consciousness and relationship, and like this incredible download. And
I was about to ask you about that. Was it downloads or in a dream downloads, or
it was
a wake download, or what?
I was having a Kundalini experience where it felt like millions of volts going through my hands and my feet. Mm-hmm. And with my eyes closed, I could see perfectly vivid this being with a large cranium, incredible love coming out of its eyes, and he projected a sphere in space. And as I observed the sphere, one geometry started at the 4-minute and another one went into that. And I didn't even know what platonic solids were or sacred geometry. This was like all new to me. I never took geometry or anything like that.
Is this when fractals come into the picture that you talk about?
Yeah, it's like it went into infinity and then turned back into the sphere. And basically, the being was conveying in kind of a very rough, crude way that we evolve, and through love, we evolve from one frequency geometry to the next, and that we can become aware of the subharmonics of this geometry, but when you're in the lower, you're not aware of the higher one. It was an interesting download. but I wanted to find out what this was about, and it seemed that there's been folklore about quartz crystals and everything. Obviously, some type of advanced science that is still in folklore, superstition state that hasn't been developed yet as a science, and that Dr. Marcel Vogel, who was IBM's head scientist, he had like 140 patents developed, coating on hard drives, liquid crystals for displays, colored phosphors for television. I mean, the man was a creative genius. I drove up to see him, and he dematerialized in front of the doctor and me, this lady who had a tumor on her ankle, using a crystal and a technique that he used with breath. And he invited me to be a research associate. He was planning on retiring from IBM at that point. And so he set up a full-on laboratory, electron microscope. And I was working at the Naval Electronic Engineering Center in San Diego for about 13 years, and all the Navy's electronics and satellite systems and everything.
About what year was this?
This was
roughly
back in the late 70s, early 80s. I met with him, it was like 1982, I believe. And
is this the guy that was in that 1984 video with you?
No, I don't think so. But I found I just found interesting, the science of it all, and last year in April, my friend Elena Danan had me on a show, talking about the regular disclosure stuff, talking about history. And then she said, well, I understood you worked with Dr. Marcel Vogel. One of the projects I worked on was a very fascinating project. It was a camera that was patented in the European Patent Office, and thousands of photos were made that could tune backwards and forwards in time through the holographic field. It could project. You could take a drop of blood or, some type of witness of the person. It had oscillators, and it would project the sound waves that go up and captured onto a photographic plate. And like one example is a woman is pregnant, and they can move the different levels of pregnancy forwards and backwards in time, which establishes what Alex Collier, who's an Andromeda contactee, says the basis of the med beds is that they actually call it a camera, that it takes a holographic picture of you that goes temporal all the way back to your moment of conception. And so what they can do is pull out slides in time when your body was optimal, all the elements in your body were optimal, and then they can replay that and overlay that onto your body, and your body can morph into that pattern. That's how the 20 and back technology works. So anyway, my job was to take this primitive 1955 technology and bring it into 1980s technology by having a real-time display rather than going through the laborious process of having to develop the film every time. So that was one of the projects I worked on. So anyway, with the show with Elena, she said, "Oh, I heard you, worked with Dr. Marcel Vogel with crystals," and Thor Hanaredian, who was the commander of a craft that saved her from the Nibu Greys in that rescue operation back when she was 9 years old. His younger brother was going to university in the Pleiades, learning how to terraform planets. Right now, he's actually got his first assignment. He's on Mars right now. I was in communication with him like 2 nights ago, talking about the sandstorm and everything going on Mars. So he said, so he knows a little bit about crystals. And so we've got 132 pages of question and answer that I sent you, that
Would you like me to put that in the description also?
If you want, or just marcelvogel.org. It's all there, or the webmatrix.net, either one. I am open with it. I have no financial, commercial interest in any of this. I just want to help bring some technology that could be of benevolent use on our planet. And the one device that I'm working on with a science team is a crystal frill generator that uses I can share an image. All right, can you see this young lad here?
Yep.
This is Jen Hanaredion. He's the younger brother of Thor Hanaredion. This symbol on his chest. By the way, they're not allowed to take photographs. So this is like a photorealistic representation Elena created that looks very close to what he looks like. This symbol represents that he's a terraformer, or they call them star makers. Let's see, I have a couple of images here. This is what we're creating. This is a crystal frill generator. Frill is like a PHRYLL. It's like the life force of the universe. They use this on their planet Era to power their entire planet. The basics, the physics behind this is how they power their starships. What we have is a silver coils and copper coils that are perpendicular at 90 degrees to each other, that are pulsed at a particular frequency, alternating, that creates a torsion field within the piezoelectric structure of the crystal that generates this frill coming up. It can be very rejuvenating and healing to the body. We're not allowed at this time to use it for electrical power generation, something I had 10 years of experience working with scientists and inventors, and all the horror stories and national security orders and suicides and everything that happened with that. So until the deep state gets taken down, this is just going to be used for beneficial purposes only. Let's see. That's like, this is the 2001 event. I'm the guy wearing a gray suit. Testifying. This is an image Elena created of what she saw, how on the planet where they have crisscross, this is like copper and silver coils around a large crystal. Other crystals, I only got one that's like 6 inches high. They're like 20 feet tall.
Damn.
A whole lot different. Image of Atlantis.
That pyramid you just showed, and I don't want to get off topic, but it's also theorized that the capstone was actually a crystalline type structure in Egypt, in Cairo. Have you heard anything about that, or is that just speculation?
No, I understand that as well. Interestingly, in conversations with Jen Han, we were talking. He said, you don't want another Atlantis now, do you? Kind of kidding with me. And he says, you were there. And I said, how do you know how I was there? You have the ability to see what my past life is. And he said, yes, Dan, I do. I have technology that can measure the consciousness field. And he shared with me that I was once a scientist that worked on this crystal generator in Atlantis, and that my specialty was holographic medical, which is interesting because I'm very fascinated with that particular topic. It's a technology that the medbeds use in order to, they can heal any disease, age reverse you, and so forth. I even have it in my DNA. My great grandfather was the president of Homeopathic Medical Society. Is going up against Rockefeller's medical pharmaceutical empire, back in the early 1900s. So I kind of have that in my DNA. So yeah, I'd love to see I understand that inside the moon's hollow, and that there's thousands of these med beds that have been created along with other technologies that I think the moment that we can clean house here with the deep state elements, and we can become a peaceful civilization that could qualify to join the Galactic Federation of Worlds, we'll have access to all this incredible technology. Our planet's been hijacked. After what happened in 2001, the Bush administration, they denied the congressional hearing to bring forth the scientists which we had in these black projects that could prove we had advanced technologies. And so Dr. Greer, he set up a corporation and to meet with civilian, he had a database of about 300 civilian scientists and inventors. And for 10 years, I flew around the planet with my technical background, vetting these technologies that claim to be over unity. And it's just 10 years of nothing but horror stories, people getting thrown in prison, getting murdered. Most of them receive national security order. This goes back to the Invention Secrecy Act of 1951.
Has your life been threatened? Has your life been threatened? Has your life been threatened?
Oh, no, for some reason. It must be protected or something's going on. Made it through Vietnam and still alive. And
well, because a lot of people that study, research, and everything else, that put their life, soul, and spirit into these advanced technologies, like Stan Meyer with the water vehicle, and that's just one out of so many. And dead microbiologists, that were studying, all this advanced technology, or scientists, or just Joe Blow just researching this stuff. They usually wind up strange, unusual deaths.
Right, heart attacks, and like one scientist, a Dutch inventor, is brilliant. He wrote several volumes of the advanced calculus of the dynamics of electron flow. He showed me my fiance and they flew us over to Virginia. We set up a lab, and for several months I met with a lot of these scientists and inventors. He had like the size of a shoebox, producing about 140 watts of power, and he was going to go to Europe.
Do you want to help support Beyond Forbidden and receive extra content that's not seen anywhere else? By becoming a patron, a few things you will receive are the full-length 90-minute or 120-minute podcast episode. Members will also receive a private link of the video podcast and will only be exclusive to Patreon members. In-person, face-to-face interviews with some of the most well-known, respected researchers. Behind-the-scenes footage of interviews not seen anywhere else. And that's just a few perks. So what do you have to lose? Cut out one brain-rotting, overly processed Happy Meal a month that doesn't do anything beneficial for your mind, body, and spirit, and become a Patreon for just $5.